Lately, it's been the fashion for the conservative leaders of European countries to come out against multiculturalism, saying that it is a failure. Cameron in the UK, Merkel in Germany, and Sarkozy in France have all gotten in on this talking point in one way or another. Of course, none of them have bothered to try to define what multiculturalism actually is, but they all say it's a failure. Since they haven't defined it, then apparently I just have to guess what they mean by it. Let the speculation begin. Maybe they mean that multiculturalism is a failure because sometimes some individuals from different cultures don't get along. Surely they know that this is a blinding flash of the obvious, but how would this ever rise to the level of a speech by the head of state of a Western country, if that's all there was to it? Does it upset them when people from other countries come over and a small percentage of them ask for things to be different? If you're confident in what you want your country to be, then why is it impossible to tell them no? I would never be averse to discussing some changes that didn't make things worse for others as well, but there will always be small groups of people that will ask for some ridiculous sweeping change to your country, and most of them are not from foreign countries. To some people, even the act of asking seems to be a reason enough to say no and get out of my country just for asking. Think about it in reverse, though. If you were a foreigner in a peaceful country with a rich tradition of democracy and saw that there was something that you wanted changed there, would you consider bringing it up? Until recently, I saw very little evidence that most of the people coming from these countries would ever ask the government of their homeland for anything, probably because they would be immediately thrown in prison. And I'm not just talking about the Middle East here. So when they ask us in a Western country for something that we decide is counter to our values, like a style of butchering animals for food that we would consider to be cruel, or requesting changes to our system that we disagree with, you just tell them that this is not consistent with our values. In fact, it's a great opportunity to teach about what our country is based on. There's no reason to be upset by this unless it gets violent, and if it does get violent, don't get me wrong, I have no problem with prosecution and/or deportation. They're the leaders of democracies and they can't even handle these basics? Really? There could also be a sad element of pure political posturing in play. All of these leaders are the heads of large countries that have been facing similar economic crises to what we've been facing in the US, and they certainly don't want the people to blame them for any of it. So from a purely self-preservation perspective, it probably makes sense. You might as well blame the foreigners if all you care about is keeping the heat off yourself. Most foreigners living there either can't or won't vote, and they have very little political or economic power compared to any same-sized group of natives of those countries. There's almost no risk in blaming them for agitating, whether it's true on a large scale or not. After all, everyone can vaguely bring up the news footage in their heads of a few hundred radicals on a street within a few thousand miles of them in the last several years. Get a leader to plant the right seed, and they'll get millions of people to imagine the stealth jihad growing right in their own neighborhood. Did somebody say Inception? So to those of you that are railing against multiculturalism and claiming it as a failure, you'll have to excuse my skepticism. If you can't learn to get along with people that aren't just like you, or you can't figure out how to make the case for or defend your own system of government, or enforce your own laws, then I don't have a lot of sympathy for you. If you've decided that it's better to just not let anyone else in that might make you the slightest bit uncomfortable, then I would say that the failure of multiculturalism is both a self-fulfilling prophecy and a foregone conclusion. All I ask is that when you say goodbye to multiculturalism, that you be gentle and tell her the truth. I'm really sorry. It's not you, it's me.